Welcome to the new history video. This video will explain the long-term causes of the First World War and mention the crisis and immediate cause that led to its imminent start in 1914. First, we need to mention that although Europe looks similar in many ways to the continent today, it had some differences we need to point out. For example, recently unified Germany's extension over the territory that today belongs to other countries. For example, Poland. The existence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the territorial division in Balkans being different to today's, the existence of the Turkish Empire, also called the sick man of Europe. Between some more, these are only the most relevant differences for the topic at hand. This leads to pointing out a detail that seems obvious while looking at the map: the prominence of some countries of Europe, the ones we call the great powers due to the political, economic, and cultural strength over the rest. These are Britain, France, Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. So what led these countries to war? We will mention long-term causes, crises, and an immediate cause, as we said before, that resulted in the First World War. Let's start with the long-term causes. The first cause is colonial rivalry, the competition between the great powers to conquer areas outside of Europe, aka colonies, to build an overseas empire. Leading this race was clearly Britain, but Germany was not doing so bad, considering it was a new country which had finished its unifying process in 1871. Nevertheless, Kaiser Wilhelm I, Germany's leader, was determined to get more, to get for Germany what he called a place in the sun, a dominant and favorable position for his country. Of course, that meant a colonial empire. What is interesting about this phrase is that it recalls Queen Victoria's one describing the British Empire as a place where the sun never sets. That means, of course, an empire so big in its extension that the sun was always shining in some part of the empire. To further explain the context, it was a desire of all European countries to have colonies that could boost the development, industrial progress, and position in world politics. Another long-term cause was Balkan nationalism. The Balkans is an area on Southeast Europe, which had been part of the Turkish Empire. It was inhabited by people of different nationalities: Serbs, Bosnians, Bulgarians, Romanians, all of them Slavs, which Russia defended. Against who, you may wonder? Mostly Austria-Hungary, which wished to extend its empire south over these nations. But the problem gets worse, as many Slavs lived in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and they wanted freedom. Austria-Hungary had a very big issue with the different nationalities inside its empire. Most of them wanted to be free of the empire itself. Serbia, in particular, wanted to unite all the Serbs within a greater Serbia. That meant, of course, freeing the Serbs in Austria-Hungary. And Austria-Hungary feared it, which gave them reason to try to conquer the Balkans. This created tension with Russia. That is why the Balkans were considered to be the powder keg of Europe. The third long-term cause that we will mention, that led, of course, to the First World War, is the Alsace and Lorraine conflict. These are territories that Germany had won over France in one of the wars of its unifying process in 1870 and 1871. Not only did the French lose the war, but they also lost their pride and these very important territories for industrialization, as they were rich in coal and iron. So of course they wanted them back. The French revanchists appeared claiming revenge on Germany and the return of Alsace and Lorraine. The arms race, on the other hand, was the ongoing but not openly stated competition between these European countries to build up the size of their armies and improve their weaponry, which of course led to conscription and increased industrialization with high expenditure in armament. This led to rising tension and a snowball effect. When one spent more, so did the rest, and so on. It also increased the chances of war. They had to try their armies and weaponry out. Hand in hand with the arms race is the naval race. This was mainly an Anglo-German competition to improve the power and size of their navies. Germany had the most powerful army, but Britain's navy was bigger and stronger than any other. What is more, they had developed a new battleship in 1906 called the Dreadnought. This ship made all the others obsolete. So quickly, a race started from the German side to replicate it and produce even more dreadnoughts than the British had. In 1909, Britain had 9, but Germany already had 7. This race was deeply associated with what has been described as another cause of war: Kaiser Wilhelm I nationalism and strong Germany militarism. The Kaiser and the country were known to settle problems through war, so much so that they feared an imminent European war. Therefore, their chief of army created a plan in 1905 which carried his name, the Schlieffen Plan, which we will discuss in further videos. Of course, we must be warned. What was thought to be a cause may not necessarily be one. History is told by the winners, and though it is proved that the Kaiser led a highly militarized society, this can also be said of other countries and other leaders at the time. Last, but most importantly, is the alliance system, established between the great powers. Two alliances that later divided the future battlefield of Europe. On one hand, the Triple Alliance with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and on the other hand, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, and Russia. Of course, Russia, who supported Serbia. It is important to mention that Italy will not participate in the first year of war, and when they do participate in 1915 onwards, they do it on the other side. They were both complex systems that started as a dual alliance between two of its countries and later came to be a front of three in each case. The obvious aspect to mention is that any war between two opposing countries could lead the other four into a conflict too, which of course is exactly what will happen in 1914. There are some important aspects to mention about the alliances and the reasons why the countries sought these alliances. Britain was angered with Germany due to the support of the Boers during the Boer War, the Boers being the settlers of South Africa that had fought a war against Britain. They also feared the German army, industry, and growing naval power. Germany, on the other side, feared war versus Russia and France together. They wanted more colonies, and they were jealous of the rich empire. And Germany was also building the Berlin-Baghdad railway through the Balkans, which of course angered Russia. Russia needed access to the Mediterranean Sea by land to be able to trade. The only access that they could have by land was through the Dardanelles, that meant through the Balkans. That's why they also wanted to have a certain influence in the Balkans. They saw the Berlin-Baghdad railway as a threat to their position in the Balkans, and of course as a threat to the Slavs, who they protected. France, on the other hand, wanted Alsace-Lorraine back and feared Germany and feared losing a war against Germany again. Austria-Hungary was worried about the unity of its people. And the nationalist Serbians wanted to create a South Slavia country, which will end up in Yugoslavia later on, by freeing the Slavs in Austria-Hungary. Though we will develop them on a further video, we need to mention the four crises that from 1905 up to 1913 also paved the path to war. These are the First Moroccan Crisis in 1905, the Bosnian Crisis in 1908, the Agadir Crisis or Second Moroccan Crisis in 1911, and the Balkan Wars from 1912 and 1913. Last, but clearly not least, the last cause of the World War I. It's its immediate cause, the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, along with Sophie, his wife. We will also explain this on another video. This event lit the fire of the European problems, established of course before, the ones that we mentioned, and made war possible by giving an excuse for all these countries to actually start it.